Hi, welcome to the Chad Bozarth Show. Thanks for listening.
Oh,
Mary Zook,
hey, Chad.
thank you for joining me.
Hey, it's great to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Hey, you are such a mover and shaker. How are you able to you do so many different things and you're good at so many different things. How is that possible?
Well, I hope I'm good at those things. Sometimes I think I have too many things going on in my head and it gets confusing at times. But you know what? I have been blessed, really blessed with administrative skills. There's, a lot of giftings that I see a lot of people have, and mine just happens to be administration, so I can just move things around and figure them out.
You know, they always say, like, if you want to get something done, give it to somebody who's already doing something
Yes.
because, and I just perceive you to be one of those people that is always able to get things done.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I want to go back. How did we meet? How did you end up at Bible college?
Well, so, oh, funny story, long story, but I'll go with the Reader's Digest version. I I guess I kind of have to start in my background. And actually your dad loved this about my story. My parents were both raised Amish in the Amish community. I don't know if you even knew that. But yeah, your dad used to always ask me questions about it. He just loved it and loved the stories. But so my dad in Pennsylvania, my mom in Indiana, and a whole nother storyline. But my dad ended up getting shunned from the Amish community because of
Really?
some things that he did and some things he didn't do. And they wanted him to, go before the church and confess to some things he said, I didn't do them. I'm not doing that. So they ended up excommunicating him to where he couldn't even eat at the same table with, other people in the Amish community. And so he ended up moving to Indiana, and there he met my mom, and they were married in a Mennonite church. And so I was raised Mennonite. I was born in Michigan, but we moved to Florida when I was 6 years old. So I grew up, with religion, and my parents were very godly. My mom's still living; she's 90. My dad passed about 10 years ago, but very godly man. But I saw the few times that we did go to Pennsylvania to visit family, the way they treated my dad, I was like, I don't like this. I didn't like the whole organized religion thing. So at a pretty young age, I realized that was probably not for me. And so I got a job like after high school. I actually worked at a bank during high school because I only needed a couple credit hours on my senior year. So I got a job when I was 16 at a bank and worked about 30 hours a week. Then after I graduated, I went full time. So I worked my way up into management and really thought I would be in banking, my life. I thought that was it.
Really?
But then when I was 23, I had an encounter with the Lord that just really changed my life. And so I started going to a church that was non-denominational. And so it didn't have, per se all the rules. It was more about relationship. And just really fell in love with the Lord. So some years later, I was a little bit older when I went to CFNI. And then after I graduated, I started working there, and I was the assistant dean of women. Then I was a dean of women. And your mom started as the dean of students the same semester I started as the dean of women.
Ah, okay.
So we kind of learned our roles together, and
Okay, so let me just
yeah,
sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah, no, go
it's
ahead.
interesting because when I think about rules, it's like I would never want to be a dean because I feel like the deans are like the rule enforcers and that would be
Yeah,
exhausting to me because
yeah.
so the
Well, and it was. In fact, when they wanted me to be the dean, when they asked me, I was just like, I mean, I'm like the most rebellious girl ever, like when I was young. I mean, you weren't, weren't supposed to get our ears pierced, stuff. And, by the time I was 15, I had three holes in one and two in the other, so I was rebellious at a very young age. And I'm just like, so I laughed, and I'm like, I'm the dean of women. And, yeah, and I'm like one of the most rebellious of all. So it was, but there again, in my time there, and that's a whole nother story, but I tried working with the leaders more so, because I'm like, people are always going to break rules. There's always going to be that, but your whole goal is to, get God to change their heart. Because,
Yeah,
you can give someone a work detail, but you can't change their heart. So,
that's true.
so that was kind of my whole
So
idea in that.
uh, let me ask you this. Forgive my ignorance. So is Mennonite, is that kind of like Amish light, or what would you how would you explain the two?
Well, no, it is not. Now there's different varying degrees of Mennonite and of Amish as well. It just kind of depends on where you're at and what community of people you are with. But
Hmm.
in my church, like even now, my brother pastors a Mennonite church in Florida, in Sarasota.
Hmm.
But it's very much like they have contemporary worship. Like if you walked into the church, you wouldn't necessarily know you were in a Mennonite church. You would think it was, maybe non-denomination. You wouldn't know. Um,
Hmm.
so it's different today, but the Mennonites, it can go anywhere from, some of them will have cars, but they have to be black. They have to be a certain color. That's more in the north. But in Sarasota, Florida, it was a church, just like another denominational church. I mean, like your Baptist, your Nazarene, your
Hmm.
Methodist, but Mennonite. So their belief system is going to be a little bit different in as all denominations, but they're not, as far as dressing and stuff like that, it's not like the Amish. The Amish, they don't have electricity, they don't have cars, they have horse and buggies and that sort of thing. So, and I still
Hmm.
have most of my relatives are still Amish. So,
Really interesting.
yeah.
So I guess this is a personal question, but since your dad was shunned, are you still able to have a relationship with them, even though?
Well, so in Indiana, I am because they didn't shun my mom. So when she left the
Hmm.
Amish church, they didn't shun her. And so we have a good relationship with the people in Indiana. But in Pennsylvania, we kind of as a family, we were like, I remember when I was real young, I don't even know. It's kind of one of those first memories that you have.
Hmm.
Um, and that you can remember. And me and my family had gone to it was at a big house, an Amish house. And I don't know if it was a funeral, it was some type of an event. And I was out, hanging out with some of my little cousins. They were all, dressed in their little long dresses and, coverings on their heads and stuff. And we were playing. I mean, we were kids, we didn't care. And so when it came time to eat, they had long tables full of, where all the Amish people went, lots of food and stuff. And they set a separate table in the kitchen, and it was a small table for my family. So it was my
Hmm.
parents, my two older brothers, and myself. And we were sitting there, and I was like, I want to eat with my friends, my little cousins that I'd been, playing with that morning. And I said, why can't I eat with my friends? And my brother, who's a few years older than me, he said, because we're special. And so, at a very young age, I was like, I didn't like being special, because it
Hmm.
was so isolated. I didn't understand the whole process, what shun was. But so to answer your question, there was another time when we were at my grandparents' house and my parents had left to go visiting other people, and I stayed at my grandparents' house, and they were getting ready to eat a meal, and I was standing there, and they had put a plate down for me at their table, because I mean, obviously I was a little girl, I wasn't shunned. And so I just stood there and I wouldn't sit down, next to my grandparents. And my grandma said, come and sit here and we're going to eat. And I just shook my head. I said, no, I can't eat with you. You won't eat with my dad. I won't eat with you. And I was young.
Wow.
And I was just like, I'm like, yeah, no, it doesn't work like that for me. And so, I mean, I was
Mm,
probably 6 or 7 at the time when that happened. And so yeah, so it didn't, so like if it was me on my own, no, I wouldn't be. But, you don't really go back a lot because, you don't have fellowship with the people. Um, so I really haven't been back a lot of times in my life. But
mm.
but yeah,
Thanks for sharing that. How,
yeah.
how how do you think those experiences have kind of informed how you view church and community on this side of it in kind of maybe the non-denominational world, charismatic world,
Well,
whatever you would want to say on that?
yeah. So now, you know, because I know it's about a relationship with the Lord and not just a bunch of rules of do's and don'ts. It has made me, love the Lord even more once I really got, but it was hard for me when after I got saved. It was a long time before I could really view God in the eyes of a loving father, as a loving father, because
Mm,
because I did see a lot of rules, in my younger years. And so of course but there again, my dad was a very godly man, and he wasn't really emotional or, you know, loving or hugs and stuff like that. But I never questioned whether or not my dad loved me. I knew he did, but I think he was still carrying a lot of weight and, guilt maybe for leaving and, shame for being shunned
mm,
kind of thing. You could see the hurt, now when you look back, you can kind of see he responded out of that.
mm.
But he was a very good man.
Wow.
So
Do you speak Pennsylvania Dutch?
I do. I do. That was my
Mm.
first language.
Really
Yeah,
interesting.
so yeah, in fact, my oldest brother, when he went to kindergarten, because that's what we spoke at home, he didn't really know English, and we went to a, public school. And so he had to quickly, adjust to that. So then by the time I, went to school, we were talking it more at home. So at least I learned it. But yeah, I mean, my mom, you know, still in her 90s, a lot of times she'll talk, and it was when my dad, when he got sick near the end of his life, he had cancer, and he was sick at the end, and probably the last couple months he only spoke Dutch. He only wanted to go back and speak Dutch. He didn't. It was very interesting. He kind of reverted to that, but yeah. So I mean, obviously, I can't speak it as well now as I did when I was little, but because I don't have that many people. But me and my mom still talk it.
Hmm.
So yeah.
Do the, well, so I have so many other things that I want to ask you, but I have a couple more questions with it. So,
Okay, go ahead. It's your
no, it's
podcast,
interesting.
Chad. You do
No, but well, I'm
it.
glad you brought up the Amish thing because I wanted to
Yeah.
ask you about that. I'm like, so like those communities in their mind, are they thinking of I don't know. I don't want to like go too deep on this, but like what is their eschatology? Like are they thinking of themselves as Americans? Are they thinking of themselves in this new world to bring the gospel? Or are they thinking of like an isolated, they're in Babylon and they're like I don't know, do they talk
Well,
like what does that look like?
yeah. So they, really adhere to the scripture of, do not be conformed to this world, do not be part of this world. Um,
Hmm.
And so they take it to the extreme of, being part of this world means that you buy into, modern technology, and
Hmm.
that kind of stuff. And so they don't have electricity in their homes or what, or phone systems. However, now, like a lot of young, the younger Amish people, they'll have cell phones. And I don't
Hmm.
know where they charge them. I don't know if they charge them at, at where they work or, different places, but they do, but they don't have with cell phones, there's cell towers, so you don't have the wiring that comes into your house. So they don't need that. But this is kind of funny. I tell them, I was like, well, I guess my family will never hear this, the Amish people. But I have some of my cousins, my relatives, they have phone booths out at the front of their properties, like right by the road.
Really?
So the phone, and they'll go out there in the middle of the winter and sit in that little booth on the phone and they can call my mom and my mom calls them and stuff. And yeah, and then they have like a machine that picks up if I want to get a hold of my aunt, I can call and leave a message and she'll call me back. And so yeah, but going back to that, so their eschatology, they don't believe in an assurance of salvation. So they do
Mm,
believe in Jesus, but you have whatever ordinance you're a part of, whatever, your bishop and your little community that you're a part of, they have rules established for that community. And so
mm,
you have to follow those rules. And so like I had one aunt who was in a stricter community, their bishop there was a little stricter, and they couldn't even have like on their bicycles or on their buggy, they couldn't have rubber tires. Like they would have
mm,
wheels would be wooden. There was just a lot of rules, and some of them, things like on their dresses, to keep, some can have buttons, some can't have buttons. Some use pins. It's just very different in every part of the community. There's so many levels that
wow.
it's impossible. So yeah, I think with them they get to be part of what their leadership says, and you just kind of stick with it. And then what other people do, they do. You don't really question it. So
Mm.
yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is,
Yeah,
I find that to be super interesting. So
absolutely.
I must have met you when I was a student at Christ for the Nations. Like, man, I can't believe that's been like over 20 years ago.
Yeah. So I was probably the registrar when you were at,
Yes.
because after the dean, I went over into the registrar's office.
Oh, and
And
I think that was the old days. Like you couldn't even then you couldn't register online, I don't think. I think I remember
no,
going into the
yeah,
gymnasium and like
yeah,
physically picking classes or something like that.
yeah. That's how we did it.
That must probably nothing against the current registrar, but probably it was way more difficult back then than it is now, right?
I'm sure it was. Yeah, I'm sure it was. Yeah, it was like Yeah, I had a lot of hours during registration and graduation. Everything. We didn't have things, nearly as organized and as far as technical stuff as they do these days. So,
But so as
um,
long as I've known you, you've been kind of behind the scenes on a lot of different things, and I know you have a lot of experience in like again, really in the context of like your Amish background, all of this stuff is interesting anyway, but it's just super interesting. So I know you've been involved in like music, getting music from I don't know, would you call it production or distribution, or what would you call what you have done behind the scenes with regard to like worship music and stuff like that?
Yeah, a little bit of all of it. So I was I was a registrar at CFNI. I actually continued my education, went to DBU and got my undergrad at DBU,
Mm.
and
Oh,
then went
okay.
to Amberton where I
Mm.
got my master's, and it was in business and human relations. And so the worship leader at that time, I think while you were there too, was Klaus. Was he
Yeah.
the worship leader? Okay.
Yes.
So when he was leaving, I had just gotten my master's degree, and I sort of felt like my season was coming to the end at CFNI. And so I went and talked to him, when I knew he had turned his notice in, and I said, what are you going to do? You're going to build houses, you're going to do worship, and he said, well, I'd kind of like to do something with worship, maybe some, build a few houses on the side, not sure what he was going to do. And I said, well, I really feel like my season's coming to an end here. I said, if you want to do ministry, I don't sing and I don't play, but I can build a platform, kind of thing. And so I went and met with him and his wife one evening, and we just kind of dreamed and talked about what could be, and decided, hey, well, let's start a ministry called Pure Worship.
Mm.
And so I left Christ for the Nations to help start this ministry. And in the, early days, we had a band. We would travel on, some week on weekends, couple weekends a month, and go to different churches and do little worship events and stuff. And at that time, we were putting out music. He was writing songs. We were creating CDs and stuff. So I helped with pretty much all of that. None of the creating the music, but once it was created, getting the graphics for it, and then, sending it through production, getting, the duplication, replication, whatever you're doing. Back then we actually had product. We had CDs. It was
Mm.
before the digital age. And so we would sell CDs at events and stuff. And so yeah, so I kind of did all that. And then when digital stuff started happening, most of the albums that we did, we self-produced them. We didn't go through, a
Mm.
company that, and we had one album that we did. Um, but most of them we did our own. And so I would get them, to the digital platforms and stuff like that. Everything's real different now. But back then, I was thinking the other day about it, the royalties of songs. If you wrote a song and it got put on an album and the album sold, you would get royalties for all the songs that were on the CD, if you wrote all the
Mm.
songs. Where now, because back then, if you sold the CD, you got the whole thing, and whether you listened to the whole thing or not, there might just be one or two songs on there that were actually
Right.
going to be a hit. So now, because of the digital world, every song has to be a hit or it's not going to do anything, because people
Mm.
don't necessarily. I mean, like if a new album comes out from somebody, I'll listen once or twice, but then I'll pick the songs that I like, and then I'll put them in a playlist, and that's what I listen to. I don't go and
Mm.
listen to the whole album. So now you don't really get paid royalties on the music that, that's not really a hit. It's a whole different world out there today than it was, back 20 years ago.
Well,
So
that's interesting too, because just thinking on the creative side, I'm assuming, I'm no music expert, but I'm assuming back in the day there would be certain people who would do albums and they would have kind of like a vision, maybe like a flow for how the whole album they
yeah,
wanted it to go, right? And
yep,
now that's kind of out the window because it's like you
yeah.
said, it's just a per song kind of thing.
Yeah, that's why so many people now they release singles, or EPs, because not everything's going to be a hit. Um, and so yeah, so it is. It's a very different world.
How does that work? I'm sure a lot of people, I guess it's bad for churches to fudge it, but like how does that work with just like a normal Sunday worship set? Like if if a church is using whatever song, I know I've been in some big churches, and they'll have the license number underneath
Mm.
the lyrics, but most of the time they don't.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, are there royalties involved there, or is it
there
more like a
are.
cover concept? Or I don't know. I'm not even sure how to ask the
Yeah,
question.
yeah, there are with CCLI. So,
Hmm.
most of the worship is going to be registered through CCLI. So if a church uses that song, whatever song they normally they'll put it on the screen like either in the beginning or the end of the song, just so it has the proper credits on it. But then CCLI has a way of tracking who's singing what because they do like if you get a license through CCLI and you're a big church, you're obviously going to pay more than a church of 100. You pay for that license. And then I don't know if it's every year or every 2 years, there's a quarter where you actually report to CCLI everything that you sang that Sunday morning.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of how some songs get more. Because if you have a real big church, like the church you go to, like if you have 5 services and they sing the same song five times, then that song is going to get a bigger hit with the bigger, more amount of people. And so that's kind of how things get credited with CCLI. And so so the writers of the songs, then they get royalties based on, every quarter based on what's being sung out there.
Mm.
And so,
That's so interesting.
yeah, yeah. So with the worship music, a lot of the money, I mean, you get royalties with streaming, they is not really that profitable. But where the money is if churches are singing it, quite honestly.
Mm. Do you know, I mean, eh, what about like with movies? Do you know how that works? Like if you want,
I don't.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I don't know how movies
I need
work.
to look that up because I wonder that sometimes how it's probably a similar thing. Anyway, doesn't matter.
Yeah,
Okay. So this
yeah.
is interesting. I'm always interested in like career pivots, I guess you'd say.
Mm.
And so you're still doing a lot of that stuff, but now you're an in-demand, high-power Dallas area realtor. How did
Um,
that happen?
well, so again, going back to, working with the builder, we we had agents that we, list the houses because I'm part of the, in the building process. I kind of do the bookkeeping and some schedule, some stuff with the house, mostly, again, all in the background. Um, and so I decided, well, instead of using a realtor on each transaction, why don't I just get my license? And so I did back in 2019, and I got my license, and I fell in love with it,
Really
real
interesting.
estate. Yeah. And I would have never, 20, 30 years ago, that definitely was not on my radar. But I
Mm,
just really started enjoying the whole process, and it's an ever growing, ever changing field. I mean, there are so many changes in the real estate in the past 2 years even. There's that's a whole nother podcast. But yeah, it's been really good. And I've been blessed again because of the builder that I work with builds luxury homes, and then I get to list them where it's been a real blessing to me as well. And then on the side, because I have my license, a lot of people, friends and people have asked, hey, will you help me sell my house? I mostly do, help sellers, and I do some buyers, but for the most part, I work with sellers, and really
so
enjoy it.
maybe that's awesome. So maybe this is a dumb question, but like what have you seen like what's maybe like some of the biggest differences between like a high-end, luxury property and the people who are buying that and that process, going through that process with them as opposed to, I mean, I don't know if you want to say normal or less,
So, less
more
than
of a
luxury.
more less than luxury.
So,
But by the way, I love, House Hunters and all those type of shows, but it seems like every couple that goes to those houses is always worried about entertaining. And I'm just wondering, are these people really entertaining as much as
yeah,
they
yeah.
act like they are?
Well, I mean, some people enjoy the entertaining. Um, well, to me, um, I'm not one who gets starstruck easily, you know. So I I mean, I love part of my favorite process, honestly. I love working with luxury listings. I mean, it is very different, and the people that come, um, they have I guess many of them have had other real estate deals, have been part of the real estate, so they kind of know what they're doing. And honestly,
Mm,
they can be a little bit easier in the process because they know what they want. Because if you have a
mm,
home that's listed for 3 or 4 million, it's not like they're going to want to look at 30 homes, because there's not as many on the
uh,
market.
makes sense.
So they have a certain wheelhouse. They are like, this is what I want. And so, when they come, they pretty much know what they want. They've probably done, other real estate deals before, and so they're very easy to work with. Where you have a first-time buyer, who's looking at a more limited, amount of real estate as far, so they're looking at something that's in between 3 and 500,000. There's a lot of that on the market. And so
Mm.
they might have ideas of, I'd like this, I'd like that, but, they want to look at a lot of houses because, nothing just quite clicked, and so it's very different. But one of my favorite parts of it is is helping people that maybe are first time or maybe haven't had a lot of real estate deals, and just kind of educating them through the process is a lot of fun for me.
Mm.
So I like both. I mean, I love working with luxury. I mean, because it in a lot of aspects it's easier. It really is. Because you have people that already know what they're doing and know what they want. Where if you have someone that's not, then you can kind of walk them through it, and so I love both. I love working with both.
Is what about the stress level? Like if there's more money on the line, is your day-to-day activity more stressful, making sure the paperwork's correct or whatever that looks like, or is it just always is every transaction stressful, or what is it kind of like for you, the process dealing
Um,
with it?
well, yeah, I mean, I don't, yeah, stressful. I don't know if I would use the word stressful. It is to where you want to make sure everything's right, because it's like
Mm.
before I send out a contract to be signed, I always double check, okay, is the price correct? Because I mean, you
Yeah.
want to take care of your client, your person that you're helping. You want to make sure that that the price is right, the option, the amount of option days they have to review it is right, that every detail. So the for me, um, I don't know if it's stress, but I'm very aware of every contract and every line that needs to be filled in to make sure that it's correct. So, but whether it's I mean, obviously there's more on the line for your client if it's a, couple $1 million home than it is, a 300, but you're still taking care of your client. So somebody who can afford a $300,000 home, they need to have that correct as well. So, um, yeah, I'm just very careful with every transaction. And, before I send something out to get signatures, and then even when it comes back, I check it and double check it and double check it again to make sure that, that everything is correct before I send it to the other agent, to the other party.
Are you starting to see AI make its way into any of your day-to-day
Every aspect,
activities?
every
Really?
aspect. Yeah,
By
every.
choice, or it's just becoming intertwined, like whether you want it or not?
Well, kind of both. Yeah.
Mm.
I mean, if you don't use AI, you're going to get left behind real
Mm.
fast.
Mm.
Because everything is going in that direction. From listings to, to even how people look for an agent. They want to find an agent that, that is producing in that particular market, that knows that area. I mean, and even, and I'm very careful. I do a lot in Collin County, some in Denton, but I really try and stay in my lane. Like
Mm.
I'll have people say, "Hey, I'm looking for this commercial thing," and and I have helped with a few commercial properties, but we have another commercial person in my brokerage, and I'll bring him in on the deal and say, "Hey, let's share this deal," because that's really not my lane. I mean, I like getting a referral and I like being a part of it and learning, but I like centering on what I know and what I can be really good at. But so yeah, so if you're not using AI, um, and in the marketplace, it really probably pretty much in any industry is moving that direction. But in real estate, it really is big time. From the way people do social media, um, to listings, everything. It's very,
Mm,
very much an active part of the industry.
mm, interesting. Mary, as we wrap up, you have successfully pivoted in your life more than once, drastic changes. Um, what would you say to somebody who might be kind of feeling some rumblings and maybe wants to make a shift, but there's fear there, or how, what would you maybe tell yourself? I think my brother always told me never test the depth of water with both feet, but it's like sometimes you have to.
You just
How have you
jump
been?
in.
Yeah, you just jump in.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess I kind of run my life with, do I have peace about something? I mean, because obviously you get opportunities and obviously things come your way and you're like, man, I don't feel a peace about it. And I step back real fast if I don't. But if I'm moving forward and I feel like, hey, this might be a good thing, why not? When it came time to go for my real estate license, I mean, there's school involved, there's tests, the state national exam, everybody's scared of taking them because it's really hard. I just worked really hard because I was only going to take that thing one time. And
Hmm.
I did, and I passed it the first time. But and then I had a neighbor down the street who I knew he was going to sell his house. And I'm like, hey, I'm getting my license. I know you want to sell your house. I will do it for you for a lesser commission just because I need this opportunity. And so he let me do it, and I liked it, and started getting deals. And so I pretty much just I jump in. If I feel a piece about it and I feel the Lord is in it, I'll just jump in and go. Because the thing of it is, if I don't like real estate, or the day comes where, hey, I've had enough and I don't want to do this anymore, uh, I got other stuff that I can do, so I can always stop and go back to it. But for the time being, I love what I'm doing, and that I really kind of am surprised at how much I love it, because I would
Hmm.
have never really thought of myself as someone, because I'm not like aggressive and high powered, and I'm going to go out there. I listen to people like, this is what I think you're saying, this is what I think you want, and I flow with them, but I'm not like real pushy or anything. And so I would have never thought of myself really as a salesperson, but I love it. And
Hmm.
so and I fight hard for my clients. I do push when it comes to my clients to make sure that I get them the best deal. And so yeah.
Hmm. Mary, well, I'm happy to be your friend, and you're
Thank
so
you.
cool. Yeah,
Oh,
you're so cool, and thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your story
absolutely.
and this encouragement. So,
Well, thank you for having me. I love your family, love your mom. Me and your mom are besties, I guess is what some people say. I know I'm not really the bestie. She has a lot of besties, but I do enjoy spending time with your family too, and look forward to this Christmas season with you guys.
all
So,
right, thanks.
all right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.